Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the 31 Days of Tarot. This is a series of prompts put out by the wonderful Ethany. I will link her video and all of the prompts in the cards, and I'll try to remember to also have it in the description box down below. Remember that you can participate in the 31 Days of Tarot even if you don't make videos. It's not just a video response sort of thing. You can participate on Instagram, you can post on Facebook, you can share however you want to share on your blog, but it's really, really fun. And this is an especially exciting year because we are also looking at some things over the past 10 years because 2019 marks the end of a decade. Today I'm going to be doing the prompts for days 4, I had to look, and days 5. So I'm going to be talking about my top 5 most used decks between 2010 and 2019, and also talking a bit about what my tarot practice has taught me over the past, I think, 10 years as well. Let's just see how that's worded. What has using the tarot taught you between 2010 and 2019? So I'm going to be talking about that as well at the end. So I'm going to start with decks because I know that's what we're all excited to see. Can I tell you this was really tough? Also because a lot of my deck collection grew in the last 1 to 2 years because I read tarot since I was 19, but my collection was pretty humble, and I even went through a period where I went super minimalist and like decluttered like most of my decks and then rebought some of them. Note to self, don't be so quick to declutter. But as a result, I feel like a lot of the decks I used the most variety of in the last few years, but before that my collection was very humble, small, and well, you're gonna see those decks represented here. So I'm not gonna put these in any particular order, I'm just gonna dive right in, although there's 2 that really have seen the most use out of these 5. I want to talk first with one of the newest decks that sort of took this spot because it was one of the decks that I used heavily in the couple of years before I started really heavily collecting, and that is the Everyday Witch Tarot. And I don't know if my timing on this is quite accurate. Here's what the backs look like. I edged my deck in a denim blue to match the backs, which I just love. This is one of the first decks I ever edged as well. This deck has memories for me because when I jumped into sort of the tarot tube community and I started watching deck reviews and getting to know some of the people that were making content, I stumbled on Imogen Walter's channel, and she had the most adorable walkthrough of this deck. And I know a lot of people actually found Imogen's channel through her walkthrough of this deck. Now, Imogen isn't making videos anymore, but I just adored her energy. I loved what she had to say about these cards, and I just fell in love with them. At the time, I was trying to choose between this deck and the Green Witch Tarot, and this one just captured my heart. I loved the playful energy and the irreverent use of the pointy hats and the striped stockings. This felt like the witchy deck I wanted when I was 20, and there was something about it that just captures those moments of being sort of like a baby witch. I don't know how else to say that. When I was sort of new to witchcraft and learning the magic that felt like, the sort of innocence and possibilities I think that opened up in my world at that time in my life were so explosive and sort of spurred so much personal growth in me. And this deck sort of feels a little bit like an homage, is that how you say that word? Tell me below if I'm wrong. But it felt kind of like an homage to that time of my life, that time of sort of liberation and personal freedom and figuring out who I was. And maybe that all seems a little deep for a deck full of pointy hats and stripy socks, but it just felt really like it spoke to some part of me, and yet it also felt kind of modern and new. And then there's these wonderful sort of yogic references, which obviously spoke right to me. And I threw a card on the ground. But I got it back, so we're all good. And I just thought this was such a fun, exciting take on the tarot, and it was one of the first things that I bought when I was first jumping into expanding my tarot deck collection, which at that time was probably 20 or so decks. This was sort of the gateway deck to my ever-growing collection since then. But I just love it. It's actually a really great reader, and it's a wonderful beginner deck. All the Rider-Waite-Smith meanings are there, and I think there's some fun twists to some of the meanings that help you to look at the cards in a new way. This is always and forever going to be one that I recommend to people. If you can get past the seemingly silliness of this deck, this has so much to offer, and it's so much deeper than you might think at first glance. And I love what it has to say. I'm actually thinking of purchasing the mini version, which is coming out in 2020. Cannot wait, because it's like 16 bucks Canadian. How can I not get a mini version of this deck? So I'm hoping to pick that up. I also have it in an adorable pointy hat broom riding purple witchy bag that Peggy made me just for this deck. So that is one I definitely wanted to talk about. Another one that saw the most use in the last 10 years is going to be my little pocket mini Lenormand deck. When I first jumped back, actually, after a bit of a break from reading tarot, the thing that brought me back was Lenormand, actually. When I stumbled on Lenormand, I was like, oh, that's new and different, because I hadn't encountered it before. And I started with Ciro Marchetti's Gilded Reverie Lenormand, but I quickly wanted one that was really small that I could bring with me all the time so that I could practice, and I picked up this beautiful Ive Learned Mini. I will link where you can get this deck in the description box. I believe there's a website that the creator has, but when I got this, I got it on Etsy. This is a Polish creator, and her name is Klara Spalinska. There was something I just loved about this sort of charcoal pencil drawing style. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what it looks like to me, is charcoal pencil. It felt soft, but it also was super, super clear. And when you see these cards in a spread, it's just really obvious what cards you're looking at, which made it really easy to work with. And what I especially liked was how small it was. Peggy made me, this is the very, very, very beginning of her sewing adventures. Look at this adorable little leather pouch that she sewed me. She even added a little decorative stitch. This was Peggy as a little baby sewist. Sewing aficionado? I don't know what the right word is. And she even put a little snap on it, and she custom fit it to this little teeny mini deck. And I have to say, ever since she made this deck has lived in my purse, and I never go anywhere without this deck unless I don't have my purse, right? So it's always with me, and I can't tell you how many times we've been out for a coffee or at dinner, and I've whipped these out to do a quick reading on the fly about a situation we were talking about or whatever. I've pulled this out on the job. I've pulled this out for friends, for Peggy, for myself. This saw me through some crazy work drama and stress that I went through several years back. Helped me to figure out whether I needed to leave that job or stay. Like, this was a huge part of my pretty much regular practice, and it will always be probably one of my very favorite Lenormand decks. Excuse me. I'm sorry for your ears. But a little bit of coughing is still a thing because, well, I'm beating this very long-lived bug. Okay, next up, and this one, this poor deck. It's not that this got so much use because I just love reading with it, I'm sorry to say. But this got so much use because I used it so much for study. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith, the Centennial Edition. Of the Rider-Waite-Smith versions, this is one of my favorites. I just really love, I really love the muted colors. It feels a little more antique-y, which for me, Rider-Waite-Smith just felt a bit boring when I was first getting into tarot, and it still sort of is something that I feel like I don't get overly excited to work with this deck, but it is absolutely my go-to when I'm doing study because a lot of the things I study are using these images as a basis. And this really is a huge, important part of our history when we're talking about the tarot. And I do reach for this deck first in this full-size version or in the tarot in a tin size, which was the one I had for the longest, technically. Because it is just one that I find really pleasant to look at. When I first started looking at Rider-Waite-Smith decks, I found those yellow box ones where the colors, where the yellows were like really, really bright. And it just felt like there was something about the colors that just put me off. And so when I saw this one with its slightly more aged look and more muted colors, I was just like, yeah, that's the Rider-Waite-Smith classic for me. So this is the one that I reach for study. It's also something that I've used in my tarot memoir series, which I will link up in the cards. There are a few more videos to go in that series before we wrap it up, but we've gotten all the way through the majors and through the fives, and we still have the second half of the major or the minor arcana to do, but this deck has been a huge part of that process as well, so I had to mention it for sure. The tarot deck that, without question, got the most use from me in the past 9 years is definitely my trusty Osho Zen Tarot. The creator of this deck, in my opinion, is not Osho. It was Ma Devi Padma, who was the artist of this deck, and also the person behind the language that was used to describe each card. Now my copy is trimmed, so I've taken off the sides, the tops. It had this black border all the way around initially, and I've also edged my deck in black. I have had this deck for more than 20 years, and it is definitely my home deck in a way that no other deck really can be. But when I got this deck, I threw away the card that showed Osho Zen on the card, or Osho himself rather on the card. I don't get into the drama. These are a deck of cards, and to me, they represent my experience with learning the tarot and developing my own relationship with the tarot. And I think that Ma Devi, Deva or Devi, I'm probably slaughtering her name and I'm very sorry, Padma, was the brains and the spirit and the soul behind these cards. And I think she did an absolutely beautiful job. A lot of these cards really gave me so much to work with, and I read for myself, for family, for friends for years and years and years with this deck. And I really didn't start expanding from this deck until probably about 2014, 2015, when I really started. I mean, I had other decks, but this was still the one I reached for the most until about then. And obviously that's changed dramatically in the last few years as tarot has kind of gone mainstream and we have so many beautiful decks to choose from. But this will always be one that if I just really need to know what Spirit is trying to tell me, these ones just, they kind of get right to the heart of the matter. And I obviously have a very close bond with this deck, and I also have a lot of history with this deck. So this is definitely the one that in the last 10 years I have definitely used the most. And the deck in general that I've used the most, period, and that I will probably always use the most, because it kind of fills a special niche. It's also got a very special padded pouch that Peggy made me early on in her sewing journey, is my combined Soul Cards 1 and 2 deck. I don't even know how to fully describe my experiences with this deck, and I'm not going to try to do it in this video because we will literally be here forever. But when I do, or when I have done readings with this deck, they have been profound, deep, soulful, meaningful, spiritual. I have done many past life readings with this deck, more than I can count. I have done lots of soul work with these cards. I have made many a person cry with these cards. They are just very profound, very personal, and very deep. This deck does not do shallow, and in fact, for that reason, I have been very cautious about reading for people with these cards, especially in later years, and I do a heck of a lot of disclaimers when I do readings with these cards, but I have used these for so many years. I've had them since the late 90s, I want to say 96, 97, and mine are like, they're almost like fabric. It's hard to describe, but they are so well worn, and they've held up beautifully. They've got a really nice gloss on them. The cardstock's kind of thin and flexible, but mine are like extra flexible because I've had them for so long, and they've shuffled and been like just used and used and used. And you know how a deck gets when it's just that well worn, that it's just like, it's like butter. It's just the best thing. And I love these. These are like heart and soul, very bonded with this deck. And I've done some of the most spectacularly special readings with this deck. So definitely at the top of the decks I've used the most in the last 10 years. Now I'm able to do some of the work that I've been able to do with this deck with other decks as my own personal practice has expanded, as different decks have come out that have let me do that. But nothing tops what this deck does, like nothing. It's just, there's something about it that's really special. And I know it's technically 2 decks, but they're mixed and they're basically 1 deck in my collection. So those are the top 5 decks that saw the most use in the last 10 years. Now let's talk about what using the tarot has taught me from 2010 to 2019. And this is actually encapsulated in a fairly simple phrase. My practice is always evolving. I think that if you would have told me that this is what my tarot practice would look like back in like 1997, I'd have been like, no, what? I have like 3 decks. What are you talking about? I never saw myself reading for clients. I never saw myself leaning into the tarot as heavily as I ended up doing in my life. And I certainly never saw it taking me on the journey that it's taken me on. But one thing I have learned, and that is that my tarot practice constantly changes and shifts. It grows with me. And I think that's what's made it something that I feel so deeply connected with and that I feel is so important to me in my life. There have been so many things and people and relationships and situations that have come and gone, but tarot is one of those anchors that helps me to stay true to me, that helps me to remember what I'm here for and what I'm meant to do and how I'm meant to grow and how to be my best self. And it supports my personal growth, but it also supports me calling myself out, and it supports my shadow work, and it supports me doing what I've got to do to be healthy and to be whole. And I think that's really, really, really special. So maybe sometimes my tarot practice looks really deep and involved and full of rich study and tons of readings. And sometimes my tarot practice is a little bit of light reading before bed or a single card draw just to snap me out of a funk. But whatever it looks like, it's okay. And that's what I've learned, is that if I release rigidity and the need for my practice to look a particular way, that's when tarot comes in and is there for me. You know what I mean? I think it's easy sometimes to think that your practice should look a particular way, that you must do daily draws or week ahead, or if you don't get a reading from another person, then you're not doing it right, or if you don't know how to read for yourself, you're not doing it right, or if you don't read with a particular deck, you're not doing it right. And I think what I've learned is that it's all right. If you're getting something out of it and it's supporting you and it's helping you to feel nourished and complete in some way, then you're doing it right. And the rest is up to you. It's just how you define it. And I think that's what the last 10 years have taught me. I would love to hear, you guys, what tarot has taught you over the last 10 years. I'd love to hear what your most used decks were in the past 10 years. So if you're making a VR, let me know down below. If you're posting on Instagram, let me know, or tag me at Supportive Tarot, and I will try to check out your posts, or you can comment down below, or do all of the above. It's all good. Remember that you can book a reading with me over at supportivetarot.com. You can of course you can. Please like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Bye.